The old woman had not eaten for 2 days when the young woman placed her last meal into those trembling hands. She had no idea that this single act of kindness would soon change the course of her entire life. At that moment, she was hungry too. She had barely enough money left to survive until morning, her rent was overdue, and her phone was filled with unanswered messages from people she owed. Yet when she saw the elderly woman sitting alone on a cold park bench, staring at a piece of bread in someone else's discarded bag, something inside her refused to walk away. She stopped, looked at the small container of food she had bought for herself, and made a decision that would cost her everything she thought she had left, and give her something far more valuable in return. Before we continue, if you believe in humanity, second chances, kindness, and the idea that one good heart can change another person's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Humanity Tales for more emotional stories that remind us that kindness is never wasted. Her name was Amara, a 26-year-old woman who had learned early that life did not always reward hard work quickly. She worked at a small bakery on the edge of the city, waking before sunrise every morning and returning home exhausted late at night. Her salary was barely enough to pay rent for her tiny apartment, transportation, and a few groceries. A few months earlier, her mother had become seriously ill, and Amara had spent nearly every saved coin helping with medical expenses. When her mother finally recovered enough to return to her village, Amara was left with almost nothing. Still, she never complained. She believed that difficult seasons did not last forever. That afternoon, after a particularly exhausting shift, Amara bought one simple meal from a street vendor. It was nothing luxurious, rice, vegetables, and a small piece of chicken, but to her, it felt like a feast. She carried the container toward the bus stop, dreaming about sitting quietly in her apartment and eating every bite. But as she passed through the city park, she noticed an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench. The woman wore a faded brown dress and an old headscarf. Her shoes were worn, her hands trembled, and her face carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent too many nights wondering where the next meal would come from. People walked past her without looking. Some were dressed beautifully, laughing with friends and taking photographs. Others hurried toward expensive cars, holding shopping bags filled with things the old woman could never afford. The elderly woman lowered her eyes every time someone passed, as though she had become ashamed of being hungry. Amara stopped. She looked at the meal in her hands. Then she looked at the woman. For several seconds, she stood completely still. She could already feel the hunger in her own stomach. She had skipped breakfast that morning and had worked almost 9 hours. But something about the woman's expression broke through every excuse Amara could have made. She walked over and gently offered the container. The old woman stared at it in disbelief. She looked at Amara, then at the food, as though she could not understand why someone would give away the only meal they had. Amara simply smiled and placed the food into her hands. The woman began eating slowly at first, then with the urgency of someone whose body had been waiting for nourishment for far too long. Amara sat beside her, pretending she was not hungry. She listened quietly as the woman ate every bite. What Amara did not know was that 3 women standing several yards away had watched everything. They had been laughing moments earlier, dressed for an afternoon celebration, but their laughter faded as they witnessed what had happened. One of them even lowered her phone, suddenly ashamed of how quickly she had judged the old woman earlier. After finishing the meal, the elderly woman held Amara's hand. Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to tell Amara something, but her voice was weak. She only managed to say that she would never forget her kindness. Amara smiled and told her that she did not need to repay her. She had simply done what she hoped someone would do for her if she were ever in the same situation. Then she left. That night, Amara returned home with an empty stomach. She drank water, went to bed early, and tried not to think about the unpaid rent notice sitting beneath her door. The following morning, her manager called her into the office. The bakery was struggling financially. Amara was being laid off. For the first time, fear truly overwhelmed her. She walked home through the rain with tears in her eyes, wondering how she would survive. She had no savings, no job, and almost no food left at home. When she reached her apartment building, she found her landlord waiting. Her rent was overdue. He gave her only a few days. That evening, Amara sat on the floor of her tiny apartment and cried silently. She had always believed that if she worked hard enough, things would eventually improve. But now she felt as though every door had closed at once. Then someone knocked. When she opened the door, a well-dressed man stood outside holding an envelope. He introduced himself as Daniel, a legal representative for a private family foundation. Amara immediately became suspicious. She asked what he wanted. Daniel explained that he had been searching for her. Amara was confused. He told her that the elderly woman from the park had been named Evelyn Carter, a retired businesswoman who had once built one of the largest charitable organizations in the region. Years earlier, Evelyn had stepped away from public life after losing her husband and becoming estranged from her only son. She had recently chosen to live quietly, away from wealth and attention. But there was something Amara did not know. The three women who had witnessed Amara feeding Evelyn had recognized her. They were members of Evelyn's family. Evelyn had deliberately lived anonymously for years because she wanted to know whether people would treat her differently if they believed she had nothing. Daniel handed Amara the envelope. Inside was a letter from Evelyn. She explained that Amara had given her something money could never buy, dignity. She had not asked who Evelyn was, what she owned, or what she could offer in return. She had simply seen a hungry human being and helped her. Evelyn had decided to change Amara's life, not as payment for a meal, but because she believed Amara possessed the character needed to carry forward a greater mission. The envelope contained an offer for Amara to manage a new community food center funded by Evelyn's foundation. It came with a stable salary, housing assistance, and an opportunity to help thousands of struggling families. Amara could barely believe it. But the greatest surprise came weeks later. Evelyn personally visited the new center. When Amara saw her walk through the doors, she immediately ran toward her. The two women embraced, and Evelyn whispered that she had been waiting for someone like Amara for years. The food center eventually became one of the most respected community programs in the city. Every day, people who had once felt invisible were welcomed with warmth, meals, and dignity. Amara never forgot the night she had gone to bed hungry after giving away her last meal. She also never forgot what that hunger had taught her. Years later, whenever someone asked how she had become successful, she never mentioned the foundation, the salary, or the opportunities she received. She simply told them about an old woman sitting alone on a bench. She explained that sometimes life places a choice in front of us when we have almost nothing left to give. We can protect what little we have, or we can choose compassion. Amara had chosen compassion. And that one meal had opened a door she never knew existed. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Humanity Tales. Sometimes a small act of goodness can become the beginning of an extraordinary journey. And before the story ends, comment, "Kindness never goes wasted," if you believe that helping someone in their darkest moment can create a ripple that reaches far beyond what we can see. Amara learned that day that you do not have to be rich to give something valuable. You do not need a perfect life to help another person. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give is the little you have when you know you could keep it for yourself. Because the meal Amara gave away lasted only a few minutes. But the kindness behind it lasted a lifetime.